If we were to choose the greatest civilization in history, most people would probably pick just one. Ancient Egypt, a civilization that dazzled the world for nearly 3,000 years with its power, wealth, and amazing engineering. Towering pyramids, mysterious mausoleums, powerful pharaohs, and a legacy that still amazes humanity today. But as great as its beginnings were, its decline was equally mysterious. How did such a powerful civilization end? Was it due to foreign invasions? Did the Nile River change? Did the climate fail it? Or did this great empire's greatest enemy arise within itself? Surprisingly, the answers to these questions lie not in a single war, a single king, or a single disaster. Rather, they lie in a story spanning thousands of years, where each new success gradually became a new weakness. Perhaps most shockingly, the very thing that made ancient Egypt one of the world's greatest civilizations ultimately became its greatest weakness. So, let's take a complete journey through ancient Egypt today, from its beginnings to its golden age, and then to the long decline that forever changed one of history's greatest civilizations. Around 3100 BC, two distinct regions existed along the Nile River: Upper Egypt and Lower Egypt, each with distinct cultures, traditions, and identities. Then came a ruler whom historians call Narmer. He united the two parts. Evidence of this event still exists today, a small stone tablet called the Narmer tablet. It depicts Narmer wearing a crown on both sides, defeating his enemies. It is one of the world's oldest political records. A 5,000-year-old image carved in stone still tells its story. From here, Egypt ceased to be just a region. It became a country, perhaps one of the world's oldest organized countries. But creating a country is easy. Maintaining it is an entirely different challenge. And the moment the two parts united, a new question arose that would stand behind every decision in Egypt for the next 3,000 years. Who would manage such a vast land? The answer was a man whom people began to consider a god. But becoming a god wasn't just a matter of honor. Behind it lay a cold, calculated strategy. In ancient Egypt, the pharaoh wasn't just a king. For the common people, the pharaoh was the embodiment of the god Horus on earth. He was the link between humanity and the gods. When he died, it was believed that he would become the god Ossus. This wasn't just a religious story. It was a clever way of administering power. Imagine if the pharaoh were just a powerful man. People could question him, rebel. But if the pharaoh were a god himself, who would question his decisions? This same thought was behind every major Egyptian institution: temples, laws, even the pyramids. And it was this silence that made Egypt so stable that it built some of the world's most mysterious structures. But this is something most people don't know, and knowing it could change your entire perspective. The pyramids weren't Egypt's greatest achievement. But before we get to the pyramids, it's important to understand another question. The Egyptians weren't as afraid of death as we think. They prepared for it. They believed that after death, another life began, but only if the body was preserved. This is why bodies were mummified. After death, the organs were removed, the body was dried for months, and then wrapped in cloth. After death, it was believed that the soul would undergo a court of law before the god Osiris, where the heart was weighed against a feather. If the heart was found to be heavy with sin, the soul would perish forever. If it was found to be light, the soul would be granted eternal life. Imagine the impact of this. If every person was convinced that their actions would be weighed even after death, how would they live? Perhaps this was why a unique discipline and a unique system prevailed in Egyptian society. Not out of fear, but out of the belief that every deed would be accounted for. And this very thought made the tomb of the pharaoh so important. For the real afterlife, the house of the god king should have been equally grand. But religious work wasn't limited to preparing for the afterlife. Every major temple had its own land, its own warehouses, and thousands of employees. Temples weren't just places of worship. They were also the greatest economic forces of the era. It's important to remember that whenever an institution, whether religious or political, accumulates significant wealth and land, it sooner or later develops a hunger for power. This seed was sown long ago in Egypt, unnoticed. Yes, it sounds strange, but just imagine, it took more than 20 years to build the Great Pyramid of Giza. Millions of stone blocks, each block weighing several tons, weighed 100,000 tons. All this happened without wheeled machinery or iron tools. For a long time, people believed it was built by slaves. But when archaeologists excavated the workers' village near the pyramids, what they found changed the entire story. There was space for cooks. Evidence of doctors was found. Broken bones were treated. The graves of some workers were located very close to the pyramids, considered a mark of respect. This was not slave labor. It was the work of a large, organized team of skilled, paid laborers who came here every year during the Nile flood season, when farming was halted. Marks found on the workers' bones indicate that their work was extremely difficult, carrying heavy loads, long hours of toiling. But they were provided with bread, beer, and meat daily, a diet that was no less than a luxury for the average laborer of that era. So the question arises, if it wasn't slavery, then what compelled or persuaded thousands of different people to work together in unison for decades? And therein lies the true achievement. Building the pyramids wasn't just engineering. It was administration. Feeding thousands of people, providing them with housing, distributing work, and keeping accounts, all without computers, without modern mathematics. Egypt's true strength wasn't stone. Egypt's true strength was organization. And if a civilization could organize people on such a large scale, it must have used that skill everywhere else as well. In the fields, in warehouses, in tax collection. This is the next layer that makes Egypt not just great, but the most unique machine in the world of its time. Yet, one question remains unresolved. How were such heavy stone blocks transported to the top without any obstacles? Some believe that straight slopes were used, while others believe that spiral ramps were built that wrapped around the pyramids. In recent years, some archaeologists have also discovered the remains of an ancient ramp in the desert, possibly used to transport stone from nearby quarries. However, scholars are still not completely agreed on the exact method used to build the main pyramid at Giza. Sometimes, even the greatest answers remain buried in history without being fully resolved. But one thing is not a mystery. Evidence of the system behind it is still preserved in papyri. Egypt possessed something that the rest of the world lacked at that time: written administration. Every field was recorded. How much grain was grown, how much was taken as tax, and how much was left in the storehouse. Egypt had a calendar based on 365 days, similar to today's calendar. Egyptian engineers built stone structures called Nile meters along the riverbanks. These step-like measurements measured the height of the flood each year. This single number determined the next year's taxes, determined grain reserves, and even determined whether the coming year would be good or bad. A simple stone scale ran the entire country's economy. At the head of this entire system sat an official called the vizier, a position similar to today's prime minister. He handled taxes, warehouses, construction, and even the judicial system. The pharaoh was a god, but the actual administration often rested with this one official. This raises an interesting question. If real power rested with someone else, what was the point of this spectacle of godhood? Perhaps because the public needed stories and the vizier needed accounts. Egypt had doctors who knew how to treat everything from broken bones to minor surgeries. Some medical documents reveal information that was used for centuries, and this wasn't limited to just the pharaoh and priests. What was life like for ordinary Egyptians? If you were born during that era, what would your morning be like? Most people were farmers. They lived in small mud houses. Their day began in the fields and ended by the river. They ate bread and drank beer. Yes, beer was brewed in almost every household back then. They played board games, and children had toys. Even the legal system was astonishing. Documents show that ordinary laborers could file complaints in court, even against their employers or officials. Records from one labor village even mention a strike when wages weren't paid on time. Another thing that set Egypt apart from the rest of the world at that time was that women had the right to buy and sell land, divorce, and litigate in court. This was a right denied to women in many other civilizations of the time. This suggests that Egypt's stability stemmed not solely from the power of the pharaohs, but also from the space afforded to ordinary people. This wasn't a dark, dreary world. It was a civilization that brought stability to everyday life, something rare for the rest of the world at the time. But could this stability last forever?